Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked, the series where I talk about every single book on my shelf, because if I don't, who is going to save us from the vampire zombies? Today we are talking about Josie Jaffrey's Solis Invicti series. Some quick disclaimers before we start. I have met Josie a number of times. I do know her personally. I don't know if she would call me a friend. I think I'd call her a friend. Relationships where you've largely interacted with someone online are difficult. I don't know, but that bias disclosed. There we go. I was bought these by a family member, if I remember correctly. I think they were from my grandmother-in-law, I believe. Thank you, grandmother-in-law. But wherever books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books, and all opinions are my own. I'm also going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible. We are going to talk about the series as a whole, but I'm not going to get into specific spoilers, though if you do want to go into the series knowing absolutely nothing, you can click away now. I will also say some of these books do come with fairly intense content warnings. Josie is an incredibly good egg, and includes them all at the back of the book, and I assume they are on her website as well. I would have thought. My guess is they are. I'll link it below. The Solis Invicti series is a series of apocalyptic paranormal books, I think is how I would describe them. As I've mentioned in previous videos, paranormal stuff is not my typical jam, and I'm already bad at describing the subgenres of genres that I read often, so getting into subgenres of paranormal stuff is not going to happen. It is what it is. It is a complete 4-book series, and the books are A Bargain in Silver is book 1, The Price of Silver, Bound in Silver, and The Silver Bullet. As far as I'm aware, with the possibility of short stories, these were the first Silverse books that Josie Jaffrey put out. As we talked about either last week or the week before, the Silverse is the universe in which a lot of Josie's books take place. If you're interested in finding more about Josie, I will link her website below, or you can go and watch my Seekers video, which I think will have a bit more of an extended bio in. I'm not going to repeat it for 3 weeks in a row. You can go and do your own research. I'm going to put these behind me and I'm going to read you the blurb to book 1. Is this going to be... These are going to definitely fall on me at some point during the video. And we're just going to, accept that that is going to happen. Because I think if we accept it, no one will be terrified. A Bargain in Silver is book 1 of Josie Jaffrey's Solis Invicti paranormal romance series. There you go. Set in a dystopian post-apocalyptic London. A deadly infection threatens to wipe out humanity. The only people who can stem its advance are the Silver, a vampiric race who offer a simple exchange, protection in return for blood and subservience. It's not a deal that Emmy's willing to make, but as her world burns around her, she finds herself in the arms of the enemy, and the line between oppressor and saviour begins to blur. After an attack by the infected, Emmy is rescued by the handsome Drew, who introduces her to the world of the Silver. Desperate to escape subjugation and confused by her attraction to him, she gathers what remains of her surrogate family and plans to make a break for freedom. But despite her efforts to resist, she is drawn further into the intrigues of the mysterious Silver through the agency of their ruler, the Primus, Solomon. Emmy refuses to submit to the cold and detached Primus, and an attempt on her life makes it clear that he is unable to protect her from the political machinations of his race. As the connection between them deepens, she must choose between her desire and her will to rebel. But can she trust his intentions when everyone is after her blood? Bwah, bwah, bwah. One day I'll be able to end reading a book description without making some sort of weird sound effect at the end. It's not today. My first reason I think you should read this series is I really like Josie's vampires. I like the way that the Silver work. I think it's a good take on vampires. It doesn't get too far into but what is the science of these vampires? Or just let's appropriate some mythology from somewhere else kind of vampires. It's just sort of here are the Silver, this is how they function, let's keep going. This is how long we've been around, let's go. I am enjoying the fact that we're getting... Throughout the various different series she's writing, you get a little bit more of an insight as to how the Silver function at various different times. So obviously we're looking at the Solis Invicti series happens before the Sovereign series, but after the Seekers series. So we're getting kind of 3 touch points of their society, and I really enjoy how vampires work in this world. I think it's a clever way to do it. And if you're going to do vampires, I feel like you can either try and be too clever, and that can go wrong, or you can not do enough, and that can go wrong as well. And I think Josie walks the line really wonderfully of here is what they are, this is how they work, this is what they're doing. And they're very characterful vampires. I think quite often the vampiric characters in a book with a human protagonist become just sort of otherworldly, oh, so noble, so timeless, so out of this world, that they don't feel real, whereas in this they feel very much like humans a lot of the time. They make a lot of very similar errors, especially across all 3 series. I think in this one they're probably the most outside of the human world, maybe? Or maybe in the 3rd series, I don't know. How do I feel about it? They are least I felt the least connection to the vampire characters in this series is probably what I would say. I've just written in my notes, love triangles, but messy. And I really enjoyed that. There are love triangles in this series. If that is not your thing, maybe consider reading this with a more charitable air. I don't know what that meant. But yes, there are love triangles. I really like them. I think that they acknowledge like the complexity of attraction. I think that's one thing that Josie writes really well across all of her books, is just like, sometimes you're not attracted to just the really nice, obvious choice. Sometimes you pick the like storybook wrong character, and like sometimes you just have to deal with that fact, and that's what it is. Yeah, I really like the way that the love triangle plays out in this series, and while it would definitely be spoiled if you read Sovereign first, I read Sovereign first and then forgot all of the plot of Sovereign, so it was fine. It's still like an enjoyable plotline to read. And there is a heavy romance focus in this series, so you kind of have to get on board with it. The apocalyptic stuff is very cool as well. I think quite often when I've read or consumed content in an apocalyptic setting, you are dealing with either the build up to the apocalypse and then the apocalypse happens, or we're quite far in. And I think Josie, it's not a totally unique perspective, but I really liked the perspective of, you're right at the start, like the apocalypse happens at the start of the book, you are in the very early stages while the dust is still settling and more dust is being kicked up elsewhere. I really found it like a thrilling setting, and I was remembering reading, I think when I read like the first 3, the time period, or maybe even just the first one, I can't remember, but things happen very, very close together, and actually a lot happens in a very short space of time, and it really feels appropriate for this setting, this kind of chaotic world that has just sprung into being, that things would be happening this fast. And then that adds nuance to the romances happening so fast, because everything's happening so fast, and the juxtaposition of that with vampires, who are supposed to be this very like immortal, timeless race. I just found it really interesting. If you're a person who really likes to get your teeth into a world and a universe, I think Josie is a really great author to start following, because her Silverse books have so much meat to them. There are so many short stories surrounding them. You can really get your teeth into her world of vampires. And as I say, we get these different touch points throughout time. There's just some cool stuff going on.
I swear, I had absolutely no idea I said get your teeth into twice. It was not an intended pun. Like, actually pun not intended this time.
Even now, I can kind of get an inkling of where I think the Seeker series is going in a way that will lead into this series, and I find that really exciting. And I also really just enjoy seeing a writer develop, and I really think that's something that Josie has been doing over the writing of these books. I think the Seeker series is definitely my favourite, and I can see where that like early writing was coming from. So in some ways, I wouldn't recommend starting with the series, even though it is technically the first one, just because I think it's really interesting to see where Josie's writing has got to, and I think that her current stuff is some of the best stuff she's writing. And I would say that possibly if she were to rewrite this series now, it would be a lot steamier. Just a suggestion. I think it would have a lot more bite to it, pun intended. I've mentioned that this series wouldn't be for someone who didn't enjoy love triangles. If paranormal romance is not going to be your thing, don't try and pick this up and try and enjoy it. I have to say, having not read a lot of paranormal romance, I cannot compare it, but I enjoyed it. That is my personal opinion. I will also say that I think Emmy, of all of the protagonists in Josie's series, is my least favourite. I think she just makes weird choices sometimes, but I think that is my desire and my, like, the fact that I'm so used to characters making the obvious choices, particularly in romance, where you're just like, no, you obviously picked the right one, and there isn't really a right one in this scenario, and I just love that Josie made that choice to read that. So that's not a con, except it is a con. It's a reason that you might get irritated at these books, but I think it works with the whole setting. I'm running out of vampire books to recommend because I don't have loads of them. Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires is absolutely nothing like this. This is like overt horror, but it has vampires in it, and it's a really creepy, wonderful, good time. I loved it. I need to read Grady Hendrix' other stuff. So good. That's the only other vampire book I have to recommend, and as I say, I don't read a lot of paranormal stuff, so no many comparisons from me. That's such a weird way of saying that. What am I doing? But as I say, if you do want to pick up the series and you're just finding this video randomly, I don't know. I would say my personal recommendation is to start with Seekers, then read this, then read Sovereign. And we will talk about Sovereign next week. Do you have any paranormal romance recommendations? Put them down in the comments below, because I like these. I might like more paranormal romance or paranormal stuff generally. Hit me up with your recommendations while you're down there in the comments doing your commenting thing. You can also subscribe if you haven't already, because it makes me feel loved and appreciated. Follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord where we have wonderful chats about books. I'm just about to tell them all about all of the various editing things I have to do this weekend. Joy! That is all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Today, we are waiting for the dog to interrupt. She's currently sat in her bed. I don't think it will last very long. Save Judith editing a video in, editing a cover even. Ooh. Is this my last Overbooked video I'm filming this year? No, that can't be right. No, I have 3 more to film this year.